It's not every day that a former president gets on social media and calls for the CEO of a major tech company to resign. But that's exactly what happened. And today we're going to dive into this pretty explosive situation involving Donald Trump, Intel, and a very complex web of connections to China. So this is the post that kicked everything off. Over on his platform, Truth Social, Donald Trump made this incredibly direct demand. And the accusation? That a member of Intel's board was, in his words, highly conflicted. Well, as you can imagine, this single post set off a complete firestorm in both political and business circles. But look, a social media post is never the whole story, right? It just opens up this huge question that we're going to try to unpack in this explainer. What are the actual facts behind this accusation? And maybe more importantly, what does it all tell us about the collision between tech, politics, and global business? All right, so let's start with the demand itself. This wasn't just some vague criticism. No, this was a direct call for a very specific person to step down from one of the most powerful boards in the entire tech industry. The person right in the middle of all of this is Lip Yu Tan, a member of Intel's board of directors. Now, according to Trump, the conflict of interest comes from Tan's investment funds and their alleged ties to Chinese firms, including some that might even be linked to the Chinese military. Okay, so you've got this huge accusation out there. What happens next? Well, journalists get to work. And what they dug up? That's what gives this story its real weight. The first thing that really caught everyone's attention was just the sheer scale of the money involved. An investigation by Reuters uncovered that we're talking about funds linked to Tan that may have pushed over $200 million into Chinese tech companies. This wasn't some small personal investment. This was a huge flow of capital into a really strategic sector. And you have to understand, this wasn't just a one-off deal. We're talking about a pattern over more than a decade, with these funds investing in hundreds of different firms. But here's the part that really changes everything. The investigation suggested that some of these companies might have ties to the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, which is the Chinese military. Now that detail, that's what elevates this from just a business story and turns it into a serious national security concern. So, as you can probably guess, the moment a potential link to a foreign military gets reported, this whole thing just explodes. It jumps from the business pages right into the political arena, bringing with it some intense pressure and, well, an immediate impact on the market. And that's when the political pressure became very, very real. Senator Tom Cotton sent a formal letter to Intel's board. So this wasn't just on social media anymore. This was a direct, formal warning from a U.S. senator flagging what he called major national security risks directly to the company's leadership. So you might be asking, why all the political heat? Well, it's because this whole thing hits three really critical nerves all at once. First, Intel gets major federal subsidies from the U.S., so taxpayer money is in the mix. Second, the company's technology is absolutely vital to national security. And then when you throw in alleged ties to the Chinese military, well, you get a perfect storm of political concern. And of course, the market felt this immediately. In the wake of all this news and political pressure, Intel stock took a pretty significant nosedive, dropping around 4.5% in pre-market trading. That just goes to show you how fast these geopolitical worries can hit a company's bottom line. But you know, this story is about so much more than just one board member or one company. It's really a powerful case study that reveals some fundamental risks and pressures that pretty much any global business leader is facing today. So, what's really crucial to understand here is that this one incident pulls back the curtain on three different kinds of risk. First, there is governance risk. I mean, are companies really vetting their board members properly, especially in these super sensitive industries? Second, geopolitical risk. This proves that investment ties across borders aren't just business anymore. They can become a huge political liability. And finally, there's precedent risk. This could signal a new era where political figures feel they can directly pressure the boards of major private companies. Okay, so what are the big takeaways from all this? For any leader, any board member, shoot, even a startup founder with global ambitions,
This story basically rewrites the rulebook for how you have to manage risk in today's world.
The lessons here for anyone in a leadership position today are crystal clear. Transparency and disclosure, they're non-negotiable, especially for execs in these sensitive sectors. You absolutely need ironclad conflict of interest policies to keep everyone's confidence. Political due diligence is now a must-have for any strategic role. And finally, you better have a rapid, clear communications plan ready for when, not if, a crisis hits. And so far, Intel has stayed publicly silent on all this, which, that's a response in itself. At the end of the day, this is way more than just some corporate soap opera. It's a real-time case study of how these massive forces, global tech, shifting geopolitics, and fundamental questions about leadership integrity are all colliding. And all of this leaves us with a really big, critical question. As our economies and our supply chains get more and more tangled up across the globe, that line between chasing global profit and protecting the national interest, it gets blurrier every single day. Navigating that line is now one of the single biggest challenges any global leader is going to face. How do you even begin to balance that? That's the question this story really leaves us chewing on.